Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Danny Jessup with DannySemi.com. I want to share a couple of concepts with you that had an impact on my life, and I think they might have an impact on yours as well. Early on in my career, I worked at a bakery. Now, when you work at a bakery, you eat all sorts of great things all the time, which is a good thing I was younger because I probably shouldn't do that now. However, at the bakery, we had our bakers that would come in about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they'd work till about 7 a.m. in the morning. And at the bakery, we would follow what was called a formula. And it's similar to what you would call at home a recipe. And instead of a pinch of this and a pinch of that, or a teaspoon or a tablespoon, we were doing pounds of this and pounds of that, or gallons of this and gallons of that. And when you had the formula, it was like giant sizing your recipe that you might make at home for a serving of just a handful of people. Now, when the bakers come in at 9, 10 o'clock at night, they work all night long and they stay there till about 7 a.m. In the morning so that you can have fresh baked goods on your way to work and to take to the office, your clients, or things like that in the morning or on the weekend and things like that as well. So what I learned at the bakery is that when we followed the formula, you would have a great outcome, a great product that you could put in a display case that someone would find delicious, appealing, and want to buy and consume. Now, every once in a while, we would have a baker that would go a little bit rogue. And the way that they would do this is that they thought they had the formula down. And so they would just go ahead and wing it. And kind of like, they must have thought they were at home and adding a pinch of this and a pinch of that. So by the time that we got there at 5 o'clock in the morning and to get the cases ready and things like that for our customers that were coming at 7, we would go through and we'd check all the inventory and we'd also make some preparations and things like that and get the cases ready. And as we did, every once in a while, we would find a product that the bakers made that was not something that anybody would want to consume. It wasn't something that we could put out in the display case, and it wasn't appealing or attractive or look salivating or anything like that. And so what we would have to do is we'd have to go back to the bakers before they left and we would say, "Hey, baker, what's going on with this?" He's like, "Oh, well, I followed the formula." And we would... we'd tap it on the edge, and it was like a brick. Instead of like a chocolate raspberry sweetbread, it was like a chocolate raspberry brick. You could literally go and build a house out of that if you wanted to. And so we knew that it was either overdone or they didn't follow the formula to the T, and so we couldn't sell that to somebody, so we'd have to remake it. And so when we would go and remake it, we would make meticulously sure that we would follow the formula for how long to mix it, the type of ingredients to put in and mix in and everything, and how long to bake it, and how long to cool before we could put it out in the display case and it would look perfect. And so what I learned at the bakery is that if we followed the formula, we would have a predictable outcome of the product that we could sell that someone would want to consume. Now, later on in my career, I have studied all sorts of different sales methodologies and different process methodologies and things like that. And some of those that come to mind is that for many years I volunteered as an assistant scoutmaster to our local scouting unit. And one of the things that the Boy Scouts of America follows is what's called the EDGE principle there. And it's EDGE. And that stands for explain, demonstrate, guide, and enable. And so when you're working with young Boy Scouts and things like that, that's the goal, is to not have the leader get in and just do everything for them, because where's the experience in that? But to explain what's going on, demonstrate what's going on, guide the scout, and enable them to do things on their own that they probably didn't think that they could do before that activity, for example. Another example of following a process leading to an outcome there is when I was working for a practice management, a dental software company, and with our development teams, we went through a process with Lean Six Sigma. I got my Lean Six Sigma for Dummies right here because that's what I need to translate what other smart people know more than me. But one of the things that the Lean Six Sigma will teach you is the DMAIC principle there. D-M-A-I-C. And with DMAIC, it's define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And when you go through that process, you'll be able to have that predictable outcome of maximizing efficiencies and reducing or eliminating waste as much as possible. Now, as I've studied sales methodologies, as I mentioned there's a couple that come to mind that stand out real simply here. Is one of them is called the Challenger Sale, and they teach you to follow the 3 T's: to teach, tailor, and take control. There's another one, which is my personal favorite, to be honest with you, which is AID Inc. AIDINC. And with AID Inc., it's to approach the customer, interview the customer, demonstrate the product once you've done a good needs analysis, validate, so validating everything you've talked about up to that point, negotiating, and closing. And I found that when I follow these processes, these steps, you're going to have that predictable outcome. Now, later on, I was actually in Chicago, studying with the Challenger Sale, training with them about teach, tailor, and take control. And then I also attended a course in New York by Corporate Visions. And with Corporate Visions, they have their processes and things like that, which were quite fascinating. And as we went through with Corporate Visions, they outlined their graphic that really made a lot of sense to me, to following a process and the importance of it to lead to that predictable outcome. But they made some points that when people approach you, generally they approach you, for example, if you're in sales, someone calls up and says, how much is your product? A lot of times consumers will do that to us, and they'll say, why should I buy you? And as we fall into what the customer is doing and generally wanting to know, why should we buy you? Why should we buy your product? How much is it? Why should we buy it? A lot of times we're in a reactionary state. We have lost control of the customer conversation because we're at the liberty of giving them the price that they're looking for. Now, when someone calls up and asks for a price, is there any value built in simply giving a price? Absolutely not. And so what Corporate Visions has found through their studies is that when you fall into this process right here, they call that the traditional bake-off, no bakery pun intended, but the traditional bake-off. When you follow this process and respond and react to the customer, you're only going to have a 26% chance of closing that customer, 26% chance. Now think about that. Every time that you have just simply given a price to somebody when they've asked, how often have you closed? And do you fall in line there? And so what Corporate Visions points out is that it's so important to make sure that you acknowledge the customer where they're at in their buying journey, but then also ask them for the permission to ask additional qualifying questions, because again, if you just simply give them the price, it could just be subjective and it doesn't really mean anything to anybody because there's no value built into that. So what's important with Corporate Visions is that they peel the layers back just a little bit, and they say before we can know why the customer should buy you and how much your product is, what's more important is to know is for the reasons why the customer needs to change. And if we can find out why the customer needs to change, then the value is going to be in there of why they need to buy you and how much your product is. And so what's interesting about that is that when the customer starts us out at the third quarter of the game, so to speak, and they've already had 2 quarters ahead of us and we were expected to play catch up, it makes sense to me why we would only close 26% of the time. However, if we acknowledge where the customer's at in their buying journey and we take them around to the start of our process, it's important to be able to see that we can control that customer conversation and lead to that predictable outcome with a great win-win solution with between you and your customers there. Now, I was up in Toronto, Canada, and I was sharing Integrity Selling, Aid Inc., Approach, Interview, Demonstrate, Validate, Negotiate, and Close, doing the one-day seminar with Integrity Selling with a group of sales reps up there. And as I brought up these concepts, she said, you know what I find interesting is that I feel like every single one of my customers start me out in the negotiation stage when I'm working with them. And then it just hit me. It actually kind of popped when that hit me. And as I look at all these different methodologies out there, these different processes that will lead to a predictable outcome, isn't that curious that usually when our customers are starting us out in the negotiation stage, how much is your product and why should I buy you? They're starting us out at the end or towards the end of their process. They're starting us out at the end of our process, and they don't even know it. Bless their hearts, our clients don't know that they do that to us. And so when they start us out in the end, we're skipping all of these important steps. And so when we're trying to have a predictable outcome with the products and services that we sell, that we offer, we're not going to have that predictable outcome if we simply start towards the later part of the game. And so it's important to make sure that we're asking qualifying questions and doing a solid discovery, a good needs analysis, into making sure that when we're trying to do these types of things, that we start the client out in the front of our process rather than theirs. Because we know that we believe in our products, we believe in our services, we believe in our abilities, our commitment to activities, and our values and things like that, which are all points that are brought out in what we call the congruence model of integrity selling. We believe in all those things, and we know that our products and services are going to be a good fit for the customers that buy them, that are a good fit for them. Not ones that we've strong-armed into or anything like that, but ones that genuinely we found and identified those needs. And think about the best sales that you've made. How's the process been for you? Did you follow an overall process, or did it just kind of clunkily come together and the customer bought it and you know, just paid your commission, but are they going to be a repeat customer, a long-standing customer? And so that's the lesson that I wanted to share with you, how important it is to make sure that you're following a process so that it will lead to a predictable outcome. Now, think about the different processes that you have in your life, the different systems and processes. Are you starting out at the third quarter of the game thinking that, hey, I just read a blog, I feel like I'm an expert on this, and go? Or are we taking the time to acknowledge where we're at, where our customers are at, asking qualifying questions so that we can be invited into their personal space, into their buying journey, and then be able to ask questions in a way that's going to take us back to the beginning of the process, which we can help identify why they need to make a change more than why they need to buy your product. And if we understand their needs, that's going to lead naturally to the next steps of your sales process so that you can have that predictable outcome. Those are my thoughts on following a process leading to a predictable outcome. I'm curious to see what yours are. Please drop a note in the comments or anything like that, and share or reach out, direct message me. I'd love to have that discussion with you to find out what your processes are, what you have found helpful, and how they lead to a predictable outcome with you and your clients. Again, I'm Danny with DannySentMe.com. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.